Fellow Americans, neighbors, fellow citizens, neighbors as countries, through our own, through our own interbranch and exceptions tied to them. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises and with private ones, originally still left self value because I was forced. Our founders communicated for us to explain about how slavery was entrenched north and south, while the breaching method against every human difference was still being and having been sustained against everyone sickly distinctly. Already before our founders were born, it had perfected its application of Native Americans blaming Native America, hurting Native Americans as a fake sideware, and how forced to make qualities of attributes debate things with qualities, aspects, and nature of debate that are being haven't been employed by the breaching method that has that lift measured and maintained left out with logic, nature defenses, for example, of what is the right or what is properly allowing people to stay calmly to syntactically defend themselves, where we know violence. See, they're forcing people they're training the little kids to pretend with pretended passions and emotions with these subjects, excuse me, like guns, like torture, leaving out what's actually recorded for it. See, the breaching method measured and maintained modern countries A through Z. Self-valued uses, while defenses of themselves as fact-driven nature, from things like criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, and of identity treatments. And with the significance of value of that is where all instances treatments have connections and with uses of names that have stayed off the records. And that is increasingly being and having been used remotely, not just overall, but and not just what it causes and caused. All that simultaneously as a parallel was juxtaposed, needing to at the same time. Self-value use is worse, singular use worse, collusions at all locations with descriptions of instances. Just like there are a list of things that magicians could do to play perception. This backed how we are, humanity as 15 identity of the ground. Identity of value / value progressions as 1/3/5, where how to discern that one is beginning with understanding how we are an individual and how each individual has a whole bunch of parts individually grouped in together as a semi-nature relationship to its complete body. Distinctly from, but also non-distinctly from. How we are the species body, the human species body. And so we can only access that might in a way that's only positive, not as criminal insidiousness nature of positive, but by using what is constantly positive to itself, simultaneously by using what is variably constant. We're the variable with where what is variably. with what is variable coupled with, inseparable from, the only increasing value of a special difference. Relativity slash hyperrelativity is right there at each age of fact-keeping nature. The value of how our species body of volumes names is used with Native American, demonstrated by nature, and it did given an additional value. So we could discern increasingly nature demonstrating we have been taken from its hypernative system and therefore from the relativity. We can't escape the relativity of it. So we could ignore its system and be other ones, let other ones lead, defend that. But it's only going to demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. The breaching method employed those negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures to be blamed on other things, others, or ourselves syntactically, but through our own humanity's names, literally. And this is where we are 3-volume sciences at the same time, so we can discern the identity of hyperrelativity, the identity of the hypermetaphysic, begins with the discernment of the only increasing value of the discernment of how the identity of what is hyper simultaneous is distinct from that which is simultaneous. And that's demonstrated by that being one of the things constantly that some of our things that are different and therefore about difference. Black pupils, whites of eyes are about difference, natural difference, how nature uses color slash S, how nature uses invisible but still discernible, the subject, the predicate. And both of those are identities of relationship to themselves, which is why a subject is reliant upon a predicate. And a predicate is only reliant upon value nature. See, we all require, every man requires a female to be difference. But difference, we are semi-nature relationship to difference is complete identity, which is two additional identities beyond male or female. While it is that, it is the identity of force while not as force. So we can discern the identity of hyperrelativity, relativity, the application of a special difference, not special difference. There's a huge difference in that too. The theory of relativity is being used to measure and maintain where and how. Uses of names, uses of defenses of what is called debate by people that were employed to be measured and maintained, pretending other for the breaching method, screening the breaching method through other motivations, nature's needs, interests, motivations also juxtaposed simultaneously. Everyone was ignoring and so they're not just ignoring, not realizing all that was what that was. There was an order, there was a use slash S to the crazy breaching method employed laws and natures of identities of humanity's volume science, now having been since semi-ancient times. Self-valued roles, identities, individual grouped in together. for names usage in defense of that. They can't defend themselves and the logic behind that and afford discern all that is relative to their actual identity of hyperrelativity. Therefore, in other words, not only are these three distinct identities of simultaneous nature, being an individual, being a species volume, being a group difference, ages, areas, sexes, other species have the same thing. So there is also a shared identity. People say, oh, God, and they want to, it's either God or you don't believe God. That's because they re-engineered God as a variable with where and how we can check. There is an actually discernible identity of hypersimultaneous. It demonstrates, if you entertain the laws that colonization entertained and blame on other things, others ourselves, even when correctly too, things that it caused, use all that comes before them to blame other things, others themselves, with the breaching method causing uses. It is a singular use slash S of the hyper simultaneous possession slash S of countries individually grouped together syntactically. That is with two other natures of possession simultaneously. Now, to discern this, we have to be allowed to use that which is hyper evidential, therefore existent too, and increasingly so. Ooh. So, a certain type of victim slash hyper victim. This employed the kids and the adults of overt criminal enterprises and of private ones, and of interbranch family members, and of exceptions tied to them, and of killers with nothing to do with that. And worse, timed uses of it, and with you timed uses of the insidiousness of logic and the nature where it defends itself, because how it gets away with it is people with formal database tied locations from off the campuses that have already been sustained criminal foreign influences of names on off them, where and how a certain type of victim slash hyper victim was and is effectively maintained within as each modern country. For example, it is more probable, practical, and is demonstrable that black themed and that white themed, semi-ancient and modern identities of the law, which means the law's nature and its identity too, as additional volume sciences, and the value of sequence before the smallest finite detail now, sequence true, and the value of that which is simultaneously that we can also use to discern the smallest finite details. One of the things that is the problem to where and how there are way less worms, and some non-existent practically. This is the whole soil, the whole many years we've taken away as suburbs, tactically denatured before our founders were born in America, in Russia, and in Ukraine, for example. We know Mao Zedong also. He was forced to entertain, like everyone, roles with the human body, species, individuals, group differences, and species body. No longer used to allowed to use the hyper-evidential, what is actually simultaneously recorded. No longer allowed to use the value of sequence true, no longer allowed to use as evidence how there are invisible but still discernible criminal foreign influences over people that pretend to be patriotism natures. There are proofs that so there are remote uses of self-value defenses simultaneously, sickly distinctly, to hide how sickly non-distinctly. Uses of this, in other words, the shootings in our cities, between private and public campuses, medical and fire campuses, military campuses, the Republic's campuses and systems. It was stayed abridged. That's hyper evidence. That's hyper evidential. That's the truth that brings revelations. All truths bring revelation. But criminal insidiousness natures, even if left legalized, and it was left legalized, what are Jim Crow laws about? Now watch, think about how someone could get away with debating this. Not just what logic they use, but unexamined too. No, Jim Crow laws and syntactical treatments of the value slash S associated with the American Revolution, including the identities themselves, but also everything as an identity of value progression. Distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper simultaneously, which means hyper additionally, where more and more of a particular identity of hyper relativity is observedly making more of itself, of its identity of volume as the hyper simultaneously through temporary / lasting space nature. The proofs of the lasting part and the significance of it are being denied by people with pretending passions and emotions, enforcing qualities of Boolean logic, which I believe is associated with people regarding descriptions of the history of algebra. The history of algebra, the history of English is not remembered by the English. In Little Rap Guy and Friends. In other words, forget Little Rap Guy and Friends. In this plan, I have a species body plan. And I'll give you guys, if we could do it, right now, the perfect place to do it through is Ukraine. And every country at once. Because there is a means to hyper forensically demonstrate remote uses of all identities of sophistication and of styles pretending other and or pretending to be about that, about counter to that. There is maintenance to how exceptions and how exception nature and a special difference is used by nature hyper additionally from while simultaneously with nature as we have it defined formally. They have space defined as that apart from physics, from the identities in physics. For example, everything is space / existence. But such agreements, for example, and or disagreements associated with the convictions that led to that, which is also, in other words, the mind ratiocination slash pseudo ratiocination demonstrably uses difference hyper additionally from the way maths use difference measuring the significance of the science's names as math itself. For example, as English itself. So there are means to no modern country remembers history properly, and that's self-valued, and that's evidential. Where and how nature itself. That's where one of the reasons why we have these words that are distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously the hyper simultaneously too, two additional ways. We are inside the complete identity of space slash existence. Well, only a piece of it's a complete identity, even though how finite, even the most finite part of every body has its volume, its complete volume. Its complete volumes has an extent, as an extent, even if the slightest bit, even if something is made up, has its complete. I mean, the smallest piece of its of the space slash existence, even if made up, has its complete identities only increasingly valuable identity of relationship to itself, inseparable from all parts of itself, individually grouped and together. So it is more for reasons more finite than them alone, while we are individual grouped differences and species difference, and where how it is significant to discern syntactical tricks, self-value, because they're being and having been employed to keep roles with all instances, defending uses of identity to the ground. See, we are 1/3/5 identity to the ground identities, but we are how we 1/3/5, because even though those two other parts, like the sequence, what was sequence true before the order of the finite details that we know about now. We know all sides were still critically foreign influenced. Actual honest soul, hyper forensic examination of the past shows consciously, while valuing how everyone pretending not consciously, a human fact-cheating nature breaching method, a slavery method against everyone sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly. So rather than counter that and uses of it, how it would sickly non-distinctly hurting everyone, even when helping them too, and using the difference of that. See how, in other words, when we're in a positive value nature progression, nature uses how someone, it would be natural to describe someone as black or white with time treatments. And you make a use like that of black or white. The difference between that and someone doing it for other reasons, regardless of their motivation, if everyone has left out the breaching methods involvement with that. And where that is left out, everyone is also leaving out the breaching methods use of that. And where that's left out, it was also a use through other identities of the ground identities employment. So in other words, not only are we a trinity, as the order of the finite, as the order of that we are active simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. And as the value of the true of that value of the extent of the hypertruth that we know is going to be the value to come. So in other words, honesty in science names. Before America's founders were even born, the suburbs were designed tactically denatured with an identity of negative value nature progression acts and natures of slaves, of levels of in natures of slaves as from Europe as the ones involved with it, because there's remote uses of their names because it was locking people to self-valued uses of descriptions of history that were propagated by a breaching method through our own self-cultivated roles. So theories on relativity and uses of names and natures of debate and how they're gotten away with overtly / insidiously, simultaneously, criminally foreign influenced and tactically delusions wrought. It requires how styles of pretending other when speaking for and the integrity of the branches, titles, and the value or the value of that and of their names. Something's good or bad. See that they had certain type of victim predator / hyper victim predator simultaneously. So to discern how the breaching methods presence and uses of everyone, it requires use of all the simple ways. There are Jim Crow laws. There are criminally foreign influenced uses of interbranch locations, names, A through Z, individually grouped and together. Inclusion with that which stayed north and south roles, with slavery blaming other things, others, or selves, rather than the slavery method / hyper-slavery method. They have our founders blamed for that right through our schools. They're using the method overtly / insidiously of pretending they think we should glorify the founders blindly, who our founders had to counter extort and force them. They could only do it temporarily, quickly. Now they locked those people. Then they would have been questioned, locked down. They were out years of their lives, hurt, killed. Then they had to rely on our founders. Increasingly to hide live progressions from the past, from all investigators, and the vetting of perception was played through our own by a breaching method that enables this to be gotten away with, where and how it employed them too. Certain type of victim / hyper victim at each age of their life. A certain type of child abuse that is effectively used to sense and discern who's going to use what our founders told us, to communicate it to us honestly. They wanted us to explain how you have to use, how it's actually recorded that branches of government use their deference in readings of statutes and precedents criminally foreign influenced as collusion with the locations, with overt criminal enterprises, with private ones forced, rolls with them. Uses of the difference of that, of the values associated with that, and as that used to measure effectively and maintain. Roles also with overt criminal enterprise, strangers, and the difference of that. used by people's logic when responding to instances, when responding to even investigators and their campuses were used remotely since founding. This is every campus individually, it's manifested as an intra value that is increasing as a value progression. Where and how it employed total strangers at the same time, including the interbranch names and the ages of their family members and the people tied to them, with conversations effectively used to lock each age of correlation nature at each location, area, and state, everywhere the species body is. Sensing and herding for the breaching method through our own. Anyone who uses correlations means, which requires uses of phrases like criminally foreign influence, phrases like criminal insidiousness. I am not a lawyer. Lawyers have also been offensively planting fake, using truths for lies, too, simultaneously, where relative are foreign influences. Mixed apparent, but the apparent ones are manifest, and there's order between that and the past too. In other words, when people make opinions about the value of jobs, they're leaving out exceptions in exception nature. They're leaving out a special difference. They're leaving out overtly / insidiously what connects roles with predicate acts, facts, tricks, with databases at campuses, where and how it employed identities needing to hide lie progressions, needing to keep styles of logic blaming things on politics, things that are actually uses of tactical delusions, simultaneously uses of tactically criminally foreign influence, simultaneously tactically delusions, raw qualities, aspects, and in fact, should be nature as criminal insidiousness. In other words, so the course of black pupils' whites of eyes being haven't been abridged. Someone wants to debate that. They get away with it, for example, by being in nature. So, oh, that's not true, whatever. And they use psychology's names. Psychology's tactically delusions raw, hyper tactically, and uses of it with all private and civil cases. I'm not civil and criminal cases with our countries individually grouped and together. As we know, the hyper evidential records them suits and dies and counters as collusions with the black-white self-value, having been blamed on other things other than yourselves. They are used to they're measured and maintained, they're forcing people to rely on lawyers to speak for the law where that is being used as truths as lies. They have people that aren't even at the locations, and they make exceptions too. Lawyers associated with Connecticut news media are being and having been influenced, knowingly to an extent, but unknowingly mostly, to describe how people should behave when they interact with the police. And because people with WFSB, for example, with other news locations and names next to them, like with the police chief Centron and his family, are involved with child offenders since before they were proven. Also with the corner of Route 3 and Elm Street and Rocky Hill. People that were influenced to pretend to make fake exceptions and demonstration of the same thing, who have been involved with UConn names, retired and standing. Then they pretend it's personal when they hear the names of a campus user or something like that, because UConn has roles with like a Violet family and people with the name Oliveri, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, various natures of federal criminals, some of them as his co-defendants in a 2006 district court case. One of them as a former principal proven for roles with child abuses. Also more KKK themed, black themed, Korean themed, Italian themed, Russian themed, Pakistani themed, timed uses of corners of streets and of federal evidence as crimes, like natures of as no natures of identity theft, fraud, slander, meth. YouTuber Anthony Wealth, thank you.